So we're straight up 1 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for laughing at me, Jody. It makes me feel better. So welcome to our fourth quarter call. I absolutely cannot believe it's the middle of November and Thanksgiving is next week, but we are going to hear from Rob and Atticus, who are here with us, about everyone has the right to have a family, affirming interaction with the LGBTQ parents and how important that is, you know, as we discuss child support. So Atticus and Rob, thank you so much for being willing to present today. I really appreciate it. So as a reminder, everyone on the call, if you could just keep your phones on mute. And if you are calling in and also on a computer, just make sure that both your computer and your phone are on mute so we don't get any background noises. And I'd like to remind you all to join us on LinkedIn. We do post weekly to our LinkedIn page, so you can follow us there. Jenny, who is my colleague in arms with CSTP, she'll be placing the links in the chat as we go throughout today for LinkedIn. And then we also would like to welcome you to come and join our CSTP page on Iowa State University. It's had a few changes. We have, just where you see here, we have the Child Support Training Partnership. We have our most recent call there. So within the next day or two, you'll see today's presentation listed there. And then we also have an archive for any past presentations. If you missed one, you're always welcome to go there. We have our newsletter archive right here that you can see. And so you can go out there and actually see our past newsletters. We have the link that will take you directly to LinkedIn. We also show you that we have representation from all 50 states and territories with our CSTP group. And so we're really excited about that. And then we have a CSPT contact information form, which Jenny created for us. So if you have any type of conversations that you would like to have with us, as far as maybe you might like to present like Rob and Atticus are going to do today, or maybe you are looking for a contact with a presenter that you heard and you can't find that information, or if you want to write an article for the newsletter, you're always welcome to come out here and fill in that form and send it off, and then Jenny and I will reach out to you. You're also always welcome to just email us. We're always happy to hear from you. So, but this is just a quick and easy way to send us information. Now, I would like to turn it over to Rob and Atticus. And Atticus is a health education program coordinator. And then Rob Curry is the assistant director of education and training. And together they are going to be sharing their, sharing their course, Everyone Has a Right to Have a Family, Affirming Interaction with LGBTQ Parents. So Atticus and Rob, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to you. Also, I just wanted to let everybody know I am going to go off camera. And if you would go off camera too, that would help us with our bandwidth. Atticus and Rob, sorry about that, will stay on camera, but typically it helps with bandwidth if we all go off of our camera. Take it away, Atticus.
Thank you, Sean. Are you all able to see just the slide, the first slide?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So this is, like Sean said, everyone has the right to have a family, affirming interactions with LGBTQ plus parents. My name is Atticus Rank. I use he, him, his pronouns. Like Sean said, I'm the health program education coordinator with the New York State Department of Health AIDS Institute Education and Training Program. And I'll allow Rob to introduce himself.
Thanks, Atticus. Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Curry. It's so exciting to be in another part of the U.S. today. So hello to folks in Iowa and other states who have joined us. We're here in Albany, New York, the capital of New York, and we're presenting a presentation that was originally presented to a group of birth registrars throughout New York State, and we were very excited, and it was very well received. And we're thrilled when Sean and Jenny and Anne Marie Yates invited us to be with you today. I am a cisgender gay man, and I use the pronouns he, him, and his. And we are thrilled to share this time with you. We're going to go over just a few general housekeeping pieces. We hope that folks will take advantage of the chat. We also hope that, if you're able to show us your face, we like to see who's out there. But we hope that you'll participate at the level of which you are comfortable. And one of the first things that we'd like to do is just to get a sense of who's here in the room. We invite you to use the chat box and state your name and the pronouns that you use and the role that you have in your organization. So if you could please take a moment and move on over to the chat box. I think you see the chat on the far right bottom button. Click on chat and join us and let us know who's here and where you're from, what you do in your organization, and what your pronouns are.
We are going to talk about the importance of pronouns later in the training, but pronouns are things like he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. Those are examples of pronouns.
Exactly, and folks are beginning to chat in, and that's great. Thank you. While folks are chatting, I'm going to review some of the course description with everybody. And just to let you know that this is a training that was created at the New York State Department of Health AIDS Institute in collaboration with the New York State Division of Human Rights and the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. And this course was created because we know that many parents and potential parents take many paths to parenthood: assisted reproductive technology, adoption, fostering, and many more. And many of these parents and potential parents are members of the LGBTQ+, and we'll talk about what that acronym means, members of that community. And this training will prepare hospital birth registrars, local registrars, as well as state and local agency staff around the country to provide culturally sensitive assistance to LGBTQ+ people who utilize ART, which is assisted reproductive technology, and other methods to achieve parenthood. So we're still seeing folks who have joined us writing in the chat box, and we have all kinds of different roles and responsibilities that people have in different positions. Wow, there are people here from Penn State, there are people here at ISU, there are people here from Tennessee, there are people here from divisions of child support and instructional designers, and wow, even a financial specialist. That's great.
We have Washington State and California too, Rob. So people from
and New Jersey.
Yes.
There we go. Look at this. There are quite a few folks, and it's really exciting to see 56 people on this call. And thank you to folks who have shared their pronouns, because pronouns really matter. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we know that, the importance of building a relationship with our clients and relationship with parents and folks who are interested in parenthood is so important. And, doing the most that we can to respect folks and to meet folks where they are and to accept folks helps build that relationship. So thank you all for writing your names, and Washington State is here as well. There are just so many different people in this training, and it's very exciting to see.
We have Oregon too, Rob. I saw that.
There we go.
West Virginia.
Yes, excellent, excellent, excellent. So by the end of our time with you today, we hope that you all will feel more comfortable defining terms related to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming, queer plus community. And we hope that you'll have an opportunity to reflect on the concepts of family and parent that are the foundation of the administrative and judicial processes for establishing the legal parentage of a child. And we hope by the end of the training that you will realize how important it is to interact in a culturally sensitive and compassionate manner with LGBTQ plus parents who rely on art-assisted reproductive technology. We always like to do a little bit of group agreements in the beginning. I'm sure you all do these when you attend trainings, and these are some of our favorites. Please participate. If you have a question, raise your hand or write it in the chat. We'll do our best to find some time either during the presentation or at the end to answer them. We respect everyone's opinion and experience, so everyone's participation is welcome. We realize that this is a journey for many people. We realize that, for example, terminology is evolving all the time, and we want you to feel comfortable asking those questions or making those comments for clarification so that we can help everybody feel more confident and comfortable. We encourage you to practice self-care because we know that this topic may be an emotional subject for many people. So however you do your self-care, whether it's stretching or having a sip of water or taking a deep breath, we hope that you'll take care of yourself during this time that we have together. We encourage folks to, if you're used to asking questions, maybe step back and let somebody else ask a question. But indeed, ask those questions. Please remain on mute unless you're speaking. And again, not sure what the bandwidth is, but we always like to see those happy faces. And so there's a few of the introductory remarks. And so over to Atticus to dive right into who makes up the LGBTQ plus community.
Thanks, Rob. So first, we're going to just go over what is the LGBTQ plus community? What does that mean? For some of you, this may be old hat. For others, though, you may not know everything that we're talking about. And so if at any point we come up with words that you're not sure, just put it in the chat. We may be answering it later, or we may not have thought of that, and so we can answer it at that time. So again, please interact as you see fit. So first, we're going to go through the difference between sex and gender. A lot of times people think that this is the same thing, and it's not. So sex is biological attributes in humans and animals. It is usually what people are born as. You think of chromosomes XX and XY for males and females. Sex is primarily associated with physical and psychological features, including your chromosomes, your gene expression, your hormone levels, your reproductive and sexual anatomy. It is our biological bodies. And we could get really deep into this and know that sex is not always so concrete, that sex actually also exists along a continuum. But for now, just understand that sex is our bodies, usually what we're assigned at birth. Male, female, intersex is also another word. But gender is different. Gender is our social construction, the way that we walk, the way that we talk, the way that we dress. This is all part of gender. And gender actually has nothing to do with someone's sex. So gender is how people perceive themselves and others, how they act and interact. Gender is not static. Like sex, it also can exist along a continuum, and it can change over time. So gender is how we walk, talk, dress, act, etc. So sex generally can be male, female, but gender can be masculine, feminine, androgynous, queer, and we'll get a little bit more into that. So we think sometimes some of the one of the ways I like to explain this is when people have these gender reveal parties, you know, when someone's pregnant and they have these parties, they're really actually revealing the baby's sex. They're not revealing the baby's gender. So those are really sex reveal parties. But, you know, changing the name to sex reveal party may not be appropriate. So, but yes, there is a difference between sex and gender. But gender can actually be broken down further. So I have this umbrella picture. So we have the umbrella of gender, and underneath that gender, we have gender identity and gender expression. So gender identity is a deeply felt psychological connection, identification as a man, a woman, combination of both, or some other gender which may or may not correspond to the sex assigned to them at birth. So gender identity is how someone identifies, and gender expression is how someone expresses their identity. So an expression is their physical characteristics, their behaviors, their presentation, usually associated with femininity, masculinity, androgyny, or different gender. So identity is how we feel, expression is how we express how we feel. Okay? And if I'm going too fast or you have questions, please just let me know. So gender identity can be broken up. I kind of made this a little bit of a continuum. We have transgender on the left. So transgender is a person whose sense of identity does not correspond with the sex they were assigned at birth. So this is where I like to come out and say that I identify as a transgender man. So I was assigned female at birth. So I was born, and when I was born, they said, oh, this is a female. But my identity did not identify as female, and so I identify as male. And so I am transgender. So I took steps to come out and identify and correspond my body to my identity. Okay, so I am transgender, and trans is Latin, means to cross. So I have crossed my gender. And then on the far right of the slide, you'll see the word cisgender. It's a person whose sense of gender identity corresponds with the gender they were assigned at birth. So you heard Rob at the beginning introduce himself as a cisgender gay man. So that means that he was assigned male at birth and he identifies as male. Most people in the world are cisgender. Most everybody identifies with the sex they were assigned at birth. And it's those of us who don't who are transgender. Okay, so in the middle there, you'll see the words gender non-binary and gender non-conforming, and the words gender fluid. So non-binary is someone who does not subscribe to the traditional masculine, feminine binary system. So the word bi, meaning two, binary, and we often think of our world as a binary world, black and white, male and female, young and old. And this is just, not the way reality is that there's a lot of in-betweens. So to be non-binary means that they don't agree with the binary system of male and female. So there's a lot more in between that. But then gender non-conforming, so to conform means to subscribe to traditional roles or to fit in, but non-conforming is a gender expression that differs from our norms for men and women. So you might be gender non-conforming because you identify as male, but you like to paint your fingernails. Or maybe you identify as female, but you'd never be caught dead in a dress. Whatever the case may be. Gender fluid is a person whose sense of gender identity is not fixed and is subject to change. So maybe you'd be gender fluid if you just didn't like the label. Maybe you're not always masculine or always feminine. Maybe you combine the elements of masculinity and femininity. Or maybe you identify as gender queer, which is also a word we'll get into. So what we've learned so far is that sex and gender are complicated, that there's a lot of different ways to identify, and it's not nearly as black and white as we once thought. So we'll go into sexual orientation a little bit. So far we've discussed sex, which is the way someone is born, their biological body. Gender, the way that they identify, masculine, feminine, androgynous, the way they express, the way they walk, the way they talk. But sexual orientation is completely different, which is who someone is attracted to. It's their physical and or emotional attraction to the same or other genders. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, and straight are all examples of sexual orientations. So just like I had that gender umbrella, this is our sexual orientation umbrella. And under this umbrella of sexual orientation, we have words gay, bisexual, lesbian, straight, queer, pansexual. So on the next slide, what is LGBTQ+? So LGBTQ+, when we talk about this, is an acronym used to describe sexual orientation and gender identity minorities. So we have lesbian, a woman who is emotionally and sexually attracted to other women. Most people know what the word lesbian is. We have gay, a person who is emotionally and sexually attracted to people of their own gender. It can be used regardless of gender identity, but is more commonly used to describe men. You could identify as a gay woman. You could identify as a gay man. You could just say, I'm gay. Most often it is used to describe people who identify as men, who are attracted to other men, but not always. Bisexual is the B in LGBTQ+. It is a sexual orientation that describes someone who is emotionally and sexually attracted to people of their own gender and other genders. So that you see the word bi in bisexual, again, meaning two. So attracted to more than one. And then we have the word queer. Let's go back just a minute, because I didn't want to give it away too much. If you know what the word queer is, or you think you know what the definition is, why don't you put it in the chat for us and just interact a little bit with the word queer? Do you find it offensive? Do you think it's a good word? Do you think people should identify as queer? And what does it mean to you? Yes, Rob put in the chat, what is queer? So we'll just give everybody a minute to put their thoughts on that word.
So folks, if you feel comfortable, write down what you think queer means or any reactions you may have to it in the chat box.
Sean writes that as a child and young adult, it was not a friendly word. Yes, there are generational differences in this word, and we will talk about that too. Someone wrote, I do not know what queer means, but I always thought it was someone who is fully gay, as in fully gay or partly gay. Something a little different than ordinary. Queer is a word taken back by some of the LGBTQ community after it was used as a derogatory word. At UC Santa Barbara, it is used as a positive term. It used to be more general. Doesn't necessarily mean someone identifies one way or another, more fluid. Another person said not necessarily totally committed or sure of what orientation they were. Context does determine whether it is derogatory or accepting. I think it means fluid in identity, but I really don't know. There's everything other than heterosexual and LGBT. Martha said, I think about it as a designation for someone who feels they don't fit into society's norms of sexuality and gender. It's a term for people who may belong to any of these groups without adopting a specific term. These are all really good ones to put in. So let's see what the official definition is. It's an umbrella term that describes some people whose sexual orientation or gender identity falls outside of societal norms. Some view the term queer as more fluid and inclusive than traditional categories for sexual orientation and gender identity, and others still view it as derogatory. Yeah, so it's an interesting word in the LGBTQ plus community. Sometimes we can use the word queer to explain the entire community. So LGBTQ plus can sometimes be a mouthful. So sometimes you'll hear queer. Someone will say, oh, the queer community, as a way of encompassing all sexual orientation and gender identity minorities. But some people will use queer to be individual. For example, I know that there's a couple, they were both identified as women and were in a lesbian relationship. And the one partner transitioned to male. So now they were in what appeared to be, it is a heterosexual relationship. But the one partner who identified as lesbian said that she now identified as queer because she was in a relationship with a man, a person who used to identify as female. So that fit for her because she was like, I'm still attracted to women, but I'm with this person who's a man and I love them and I'm attracted to them. So that was how they identified. For other people, they might say, well, I'm queer because I recognize, that there's the possibility to be attracted to anybody. Or I identify my gender as queer, which means that I don't fit a traditional category and I leave it open to interpretation. But there's also the generational difference. Right, so Rob.
Could I chime in?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating to me how, I hate to say the newer generation, but, younger folks have reclaimed the term queer. In my generation, queer was a horrible thing to call someone. Look at that queer. You're so queer. It was almost equivalent to being called a fag. And so it had a very negative connotation. And still sometimes when I hear the word, I'll just be honest, I still feel an ouch, like a microaggression. And then I have to put it into context as to why is someone saying it. So even though someone may not be saying to me, you're so queer, and I probably would still laugh at that and say, well, yes, of course I am. I have to sometimes catch myself and say, that's the beauty of the evolution of the terminology of a group of folks who have taken it and reclaimed it for the community. And so it is really kind of interesting to sort of have that feeling. for a word that traditionally didn't have a positive connotation.
Yeah, and it's why I love doing this training with Rob, because we do come from different generations. So like Rob says, it's still feels like a microaggression and word that is offensive. But for me, it wasn't. So I was coming of age in the time where people were really reclaiming it and using it as something positive. And to say, like, maybe I don't need an exact label, but queer is a great word that encompasses anything that maybe not traditional or binary, or feeling like I can say queer and it encompasses all sorts of different meanings. So I love that about this training and working with Rob, because we come from different generations and have different experiences with that word. So we're going to move on to a different word, which you saw under the umbrella, but is the word pansexual. We'll put it in the chat. What is pansexual? So just like queer, we're going to take a few minutes to see if you know or have heard of the word pansexual before.
You're a fast typer.
Sean doesn't have any idea. Janet says attracted to all variants on the spectrum.
We're not this is sort of a judgment-free zone. So, give it a shot. If you think you know what part of it may mean, or if you've heard what it may mean, give it a shot. This is, all part of our learning community.
If you know Schitt's Creek, I wish my colleague Jen was here. She loves that show just like I do. And on Schitt's Creek, the one character, Dan Levy, played Dan Levy's character, David, identifies as pansexual. And Roland goes, yeah, I've heard of that one. That's where people are attracted to pans. That would be incorrect. So it's not being attracted to pans. You may remember the scene, if you've watched the show, about the wine, not the label. And so we've got some things in here in the chat. Martha says someone who loves the person without regard to gender or sex. Jeanette, attracted to all sexual orientations. Someone attracted to everyone on the spectrum, attracted to all orientations, attracted to all people. Audrey says they assumed it meant being attracted to trans or gender nonconforming. Yeah, this is great. So the official, term we have describes a person who is romantically and or sexually attracted to people based upon features other than gender. People may also choose to describe themselves as pansexual to acknowledge attraction to various genders beyond the traditional binary of male and female. Yeah, and I really like this term because it really talks about what attraction really is. And attraction can be so complex. You may be attracted to people because of their intelligence or their passion for something. You may be sexually attracted to people because of the way that they walk, or their swagger, or their confidence, or there's just so many things beyond just because they're a male or a female. So it's really about being romantically or sexually attracted to people regardless of their gender or their sex or how they identify. And the second half of that definition, about choosing to describe themselves as pansexual to acknowledge attraction to various genders beyond the traditional binary of male and female. So that's really great. It's about recognizing that there's more than two genders, and saying, I could be attracted to trans men or trans women or non-binary people or masculine people who choose to wear dresses, or, whatever the case may be. People might say pansexual because they're attracted to people assigned female at birth, whether that means that they're masculine or feminine or androgynous, as an example. So pansexual really encompasses whatever, it's both broad and personal to what someone might choose to identify. So that is pansexual and queer, two words. So within the LGBTQ plus community, you're going to see a lot of different words that you may not have heard of before, beyond lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and the Q, which can actually mean queer, or it could mean questioning, someone who's not quite sure. And the plus is for, there's different words, scoliosexual, demisexual, there's a lot, androgynous, gender queer, gender fluid, non-binary, gender non-conforming. There's asexual. There's a lot of terms out there that we simply don't have time to cover. So I just encourage you to check out resources. GLAAD is Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against, whoa, went backwards. Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation has great resources. HRC, which is the Human Rights Campaign, has resources. There's just all sorts of stuff out there. And someone asked in the comment, what is scoliosexual? Scoliosexual, I actually forget. There's a lot of terms out there. I know demisexual is not being attracted to someone sexually until you form an emotional connection. But I have to look up scoliosexual. But I will get back to you on that. So we're also going to move into the importance of pronouns. So we asked you all to use your pronouns earlier in the chat. So some examples of pronouns are he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. And there's also the one z, zir, and zirs, which is not very common, but does exist as a pronoun. So why do pronouns matter? It's a sign of respect for someone's identity. So if I was to tell you, hey, I'm Atticus, I use he, him, his pronouns, and you were to say, no, you were born female, so I'm going to use she, her, hers pronouns for you because I see you as a woman. That would be disrespectful. By saying, oh, Atticus, you use he, him, his, and you use those pronouns for me, then that means that you respect my identity and who I am and see transgender and a trans male as a valid identity. So it's a sign of respect. It also really helps to create an inclusive environment. So by using our pronouns, like in our email introductions or when we're starting trainings like this, it helps people know that this is a space where they can be who they are. And it's especially important for people who might say, hey, my name is Atticus, I use he, him, his, but maybe I was really early in my transition and I didn't really look male yet. So by creating an inclusive environment and allowing people to self-identify their pronouns, it's saying, we'll use whatever pronouns you say, whether or not you look male or look female, which is, of course, silly. What does a male or a female look like? But it creates the environment where people can say, this is how I identify, and it just brings everybody into the fold. That which brings up the making an assumption based on someone's appearance, which sends a potentially harmful message. So just because someone might say, I identify as she and may or may not look like it, quote unquote, by saying, oh, I just assumed your pronouns, could be potentially harmful. So I know, especially like when I was early in my transition, and people used he, him, his pronouns, it made me feel really good and made me feel like I looked how I feel. And if someone was using she, her, hers, it meant like it made me feel really yucky and I was kind of off for the rest of the day because it made me feel like people aren't seeing me for who I am. So it can be potentially harmful to use pronouns that wouldn't be right for that person. Finally, it's always important to use the appropriate pronouns and name even when that person isn't around. So when I was first transitioning, I was like, my name's Atticus, I use he, him, his, and I would say like, you need to practice it when I'm not around. So like, for example, if my mom would be talking about me when I'm not around, I was like, you need to make sure that you're using the right pronouns so that way when I am around, it comes more naturally to you. So that is about the importance of pronouns. And I see that some people put stuff in the comments. Jody, sexuality is the attraction to people who are transgender or non-binary. And Rob followed that up as not attraction to people who are trans. So yes, that would be an example of scoliosexual. Okay, and then we have the key points from this section of the training. Gender and gender identity and gender expression, sex and sexual orientation are all independent of one another. So a person's sexual orientation is distinct from a person's sex, which is distinct from a person's gender. Sex does not equal gender and does not equal sexual orientation. And I want to make that clear. So, for example, I was assigned female at birth, which was my sex. but I now identify my sex as male. My gender is masculine. My sexual orientation is straight because I am attracted to women. When I was a female, identifying as a female, I was still attracted to women and I identified as a lesbian. But now that my sex and gender have changed, my sexual orientation has changed with it. I hope that that makes sense. Please, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we will do our best to answer them. We will move on to modern families. Rob?
Thanks for sharing that, Atticus. And thanks for explaining that so well. You know, it's all about building a relationship and not drawing assumptions about people, right? If we use the wrong pronoun, if we use the wrong, we assume someone's sexual orientation, you know, all these things could, if not done properly, not enhance the relationship. And so, you know, it's time to talk a little bit about, we call this modern families, even though there's a TV show called Modern Families, but, you know, it's about exploring the definition of family and parent and how that may be different than, you know, what tradition may have told us about what families are and who is worthy of being a parent. And so I like to do a little exercise right now, just for a minute. It's a personal reflection, and I'd like you to think a little bit about when you think about families and hear the word family, why is family important to you? Why is family important to you? And everybody may have different answers, but I'd like you to think about why family is important. And I'd like you to also think about, for those on today's call who are parents or those who know someone who is a parent, what are the different emotions that folks have during the first days and weeks of being a parent? If you feel comfortable, you could write some of those responses in the chat. Why is family important? And for parents, what are the different emotions that folks have during their first days or weeks as being a parent? And we're getting some nice answers already. Support system, not always biological. Thank you. The bond or connection. Identity, a sense of belonging, shared history. One of our colleagues talked about when a child was born, how thrilled they were to be their mom. A loving collection of people, a loving and supportive unit, equal parts joy and terror for the first child, because you wonder if what you're doing is right. Sure, it may be scary. There may be a lot of different emotions ranging from happy to scared. And you know, the biggest, most important job that you have is raising this little bundle of joy the best that you can, a new sense of responsibility. Thank you all for sharing, because what it reminds us of is that you know, families are an important part of our society, and families are full of many different emotions and are full of just a great sense of, I mean, if you look at the descriptors here, a great sense of positivity. You know, traditionally, when we look at what a family is, the definition is a group of people who are related by birth or affinity, marriage, or other relationships. The purpose of families is to maintain the well-being of its members and of society. And ideally, families would offer predictability and structure and safety. And it's within families that children acquire socialization for life outside of the family. That's what the purpose of families are. I love the fact that we get to talk about different types of families, and especially right now, talking about family of choice. I'm not sure if you've heard that term before. You may have heard it referred as a chosen family or a found family. The family of choice is very common with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming, queer, and curious and questioning communities. Also very common with veterans, individuals who suffered abuse, and those who have no contact with their biological parents. You know, family of choice is different than family of origin. and those that actively assume that ideal role, because family of choice may or may not include some or all members of the family of origin. The terminology family of choice stems from the fact that many LGBTQ plus folks, upon coming out, face or faced rejection or shame from the families in which they were raised. And so in order to be able to continue on with our journey of self-acceptance, we found folks who supported us, who were outside of that traditional family of origin. And as a family system, families of choice face unique issues. You know, the families of choice could be, you know, close friends, they could be neighbors, they could be a support system, they could be some members of the immediate or extended family. But it's really fascinating to know that many of us have a family of choice very, very different than our blood families. And in a lot of cases, they're much more supportive than our blood families as well. But families of choice face unique issues. Without legal safeguards, families of choice may struggle when medical, educational, or governmental institutions fail to recognize their legitimacy. And that's why this is so important.
Thanks, Rob. We're going to talk briefly about.
What do you know about parenting? What can you tell us about LGBTQ plus parenting?
So we know that 63% of LGBTQ millennials, which is those born between 1980 and about 1995, 63% of us, that's me, are considering expanding their families, either becoming parents for the first time or by having more children. You might be surprised that so many LGBTQ plus millennials do want to either become or expand. 48% of LGBTQ millennials are actively planning to grow their families right now, compared to 55% of non-LGBTQ millennials, which I think is surprising. There's almost as many LGBTQ people as non-LGBTQ young people who are trying to grow their families. 63% of LGBTQ people planning families expect to use assisted reproductive technology, which is ART, which is surrogacy, in vitro fertilization, egg donors, sperm donors, etc. Foster care or adoption to become parents. And not really surprisingly, same-sex couples are 6 times more likely to foster children and at least 4 times more likely to adopt than their non-LGBTQ counterparts. So depending on the relationship between the LGBTQ people, it could be very difficult to have biological children or incredibly expensive. So a lot of times they may turn to fostering or adoption. So if you work with people who are LGBTQ and may choose to have children, you may be more likely to interact with same-sex couples or LGBTQ parents than you would, or prospective parents than you would non-LGBTQ people. Which is why it's so important that nationwide and statewide, across your individual state, that same-sex couples and LGBTQ couples are given the right to adopt and foster, which is not the case in every state. Amelia said it is so expensive. Yes, it is. My wife and I, we are both trans. She's a trans woman and I'm a trans man, and we have been looking into the foster adoption ART process, and no matter which you choose, it's just kind of terrible. So yeah, the process can be very expensive, time consuming, etc. So yes. Those are some of the source that I got this information from. There are others out there, but familyequality.org is a good place to start. Jody says, so many babies that need love, said in the chat. You're exactly right, which is why it's important that LGBTQ people have the option to adopt and foster and use ART, because there are so many babies out there that need love and so many families that would love to have them, and the process can be time consuming, expensive, etc. Some of the key points from this section is that everyone deserves the right to have a family. If you want one, we should be able to have one, whether you're trying to create a family or you're a young person who needs a support system. Everyone deserves the right to have a family. Some LGBTQ plus individuals have been rejected by their biological families and create families of choice. And it's important that these families of choice are legitimized, that you don't have to be blood related to be important and cared for. Families of choice are real families. These are not fake families. They support each other. They love each other. They're there for each other. And LGBTQ plus people are or want to become parents, like we've seen in the last slide with all the statistics. And they're more likely to use ART, assisted reproductive technology, adoption, or foster care than non-LGBTQ people. Okay, and then we'll talk about do's and don'ts of working with LGBTQ plus people. Check the time. So I'm going to go through quickly because we want to make sure that we have time for questions and answers. So just some things to avoid. You should just in general avoid asking anything related to anybody's body. So if you're interacting with LGBTQ plus people and it's not relevant to your work, don't ask them who gave birth or how they afforded it or who donated what body parts, or if it's not relevant, just don't ask people about their bodies. Try to avoid seeming judgmental. Maybe they've been together for a long time, so they're a little older, or maybe they had to save up for a long time. You don't want to ask about the child or the surrogate. Just try to avoid being judgmental. Don't make assumptions about anybody's body. If my wife and I were to give birth, she would be the person who donates the sperm, and I would have been the person who donated an egg. So we just don't want to assume about anybody's body. Try not to tell the intended parents who are LGBTQ plus about other LGBTQ plus people you may know. That's just kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like, oh, you're trans. Oh, I know this one other trans person. Okay, we're not all the same. If you've met one LGBTQ plus person, you've met one LGBTQ plus person. Avoid assigning a gender when you refer to the baby. So if someone is born and the sex is a boy, you don't want to necessarily call them a boy or use he, him, his pronouns. Some families are choosing to raise their children gender neutral, no matter what their body is, and allowing the child to define their own gender. So just try to use they, them, theirs pronouns when you're referring to a baby, and let the parents tell you what pronouns they're going to be using. Do not assume the gender of the intended parents based on appearance. Do not call the intended parents mother or father, or try to assign a role to either person. You don't know how they're going to identify themselves to their child, so try not to use mom or dad. Do not inquire or make comments about the age of an intended parent. Like I said, they could have been saving up for a really long time. Or maybe they're really young. Just in general, we shouldn't comment on people's age, whether they're LGBTQ or not. Avoid asking personal questions simply out of curiosity. How could you afford this? How did you find the surrogate? How much did you pay them? If they're personal and they're just because you're curious, try to avoid that. And try to avoid comments that would hinder the intended parents' excitement about becoming parents. They are so excited to be parents, probably have worked a long time for this, saved up for a long time, and anything that hinders it is just they're gonna remember it, and it will really dampen their excitement. So want to try to avoid that. And then Rob will go quickly through ways to support all modern families.
Sure. Thanks, Atticus. And that's my little timer reminding us we have a couple more minutes until questions. But the great things about supporting all families is to remember the excitement, and to remember that love makes a family, and to remember that babies that are born through art or those that are adopted or fostered are welcome and loved just as much as babies that are born to all other parents. So those are some of the emotions that we saw in the previous chat. Somebody alluded to this, and I'd like to, on the next slide, it reminds us that we have to remember that many LGBTQ folks had to endure invasive, expensive, and time-consuming processes, including home studies and court-ordered adoptions, to ensure that both parents and children were protected by a legal relationship. So it's so important to offer support because folks have really been through quite a lot to be able to prove their worthiness to be parents, And when modern families do not have an extended family, they can still form a support system. There's quite a variety of resources that are in the next couple of slides, and we hope that, on your own self-journey of learning more about LGBTQ plus issues, as well as LGBTQ plus parenting, you might refer to some of these great resources. One of the best points is number 9, which I always like to sort of reiterate the importance of creating a safe environment when families trust you. You know, it's important to ask if it's okay to ask questions. And it's important to use what I call a trauma-informed lens. You know, the principles of trauma-informed care, safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment are so important. And you may be interested in exploring trauma-informed care a little bit because many folks may have had some trauma. Trauma is universal, and the process of becoming a parent and some of the barriers that folks have faced can indeed be just very, very hard on them and worth mentioning. And remember that pronouns matter. And there's nothing wrong with asking folks how they identify and what their pronouns are instead of making assumptions. That's why very often in trainings we say, my name is Rob and my pronouns are he, him, and his, as if it is giving folks, the permission and or the safety, the safe space to be able to come out and say who they are. And a couple more points, allies are the movement needs allies just as much as the movement needs folks who are involved in the movement. Please do your own work. Please research resources and become comfortable and confident. This will help you be less anxious around different families and different family structures. And it is truly okay to learn from your mistakes, because if you can tell that something you said or did made someone feel uncomfortable, or if they even told you it made them feel uncomfortable, you'll avoid making it the next time, and don't dwell on it. Just move forward. And again, here's another resource that may be helpful to you. The last slide reminds me of growing up and my parents having a book by Dr. Spock on the shelf there. I think it was called Baby and Child Care. And he had a great quote that talks about how important it is that the children who are appreciated for who they are and what they are will grow up with confidence in themselves and be happy. And they'll have a spirit that'll make the best of all the capacities they have and all the opportunities that come their way. It really is about providing support to parents and families and children. And we hope that maybe you'll throw us some questions that you may have some burning desires to comment on, and we might be able to answer them in the short time that we have left.
Want to just do the contact information? You can see myself and Rob. And we also have Anne Marie Yeats, who works in the Office of Temporary and Disability Studies, who helped us with this training, and she's also available for questions. So at this time, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself.
I have a question. This is Jody from Tennessee. I work in the child support office, and I want to know the best way when we do paternity interviews for people. Is there a best way to interview people without just coming across, blunt and trying to get this paternity information? Is there a good way, a best practice suggestion that you guys would have to just, make that more comfortable to have that conversation with those folks?
Yeah, often what can be frustrating is that we want to do our best and we're given these forms that aren't caught up to modern times, which is why New York put together the Child Parent Security Act and is this really great way of capturing paternity without calling it paternity. So I would say whenever you need to introduce yourself, like if you're getting information from someone, start with yourself. Say like, hello, my name is Jody. I use she, her, hers pronouns. What pronouns do you use? And that's a really good way of starting out, because we would never ask someone how they identify without also stating how we identify. So it's a really good way to get that out there, to be respectful that, hey, I would also answer this question. So I would start with that. And then like recognize the limitations. Like this is going to say paternity, but I recognize we're really talking about parentage. Like someone wrote in the chat, that the form might say this, and I know that, this might be a little bit outdated, but that's what the form says, but I'm going to use the word parentage. And that's a really good way of making sure that they know that that this is not the best.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
welcome.
I would also, remind folks that when we're looking with a trauma-informed care lens, sometimes the best we can do is not make things any worse and not re-traumatize anyone if indeed they're not feeling safe. So it's about how can we, through our words and through our actions, be sort of purposeful in creating a safe space, giving people choice in answering their questions and how they answer their questions and where they answer their questions and when they answer those questions. This can be very empowering for folks.
We'll stop sharing, Sean. I believe that we will be sending out the slides afterwards. So if you need my our contact information, that is available. That will be available to you all if you want to chat afterwards or something as well.
Yeah, that's correct. We will be sending or posting this presentation to our website, which will have Atticus and Rob's information available there, and Anne-Marie also. And so thank you so much for your presentation. I've learned so much in this last hour, and I feel like it's going to help me be a better parent to my child. So thank you very much for that. Does anybody else have any other questions they'd like to ask before I move on to my next slide that I'm excited about? And you can come off of mute or put it in the chat if you'd like. And sorry, I closed my chat down, so I have to open it back up. Don't believe I'm seeing any questions. Okay, just thanks you. All right, so here's the exciting part. We're not done with this conversation. So Anne-Marie Yates, which Atticus and Rob mentioned, and Anne-Marie spearheaded, her team spearheaded the Child Parent Security Act in New York. So that was signed into law April 3rd, 2020, and took effect on February 15th, 2021. And the presentation she is going to give a presentation on this in February. So mark your calendars for February 10th, 2022 at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And of course, you all know I'll send out a meeting request and all of that. But Anne-Marie is actually going to cover this topic. So she'll talk about parentage law and surrogacy in New York State, how the CPSA changed the New York law, and then how New York State Division of Child Support Services implemented the CPSA, including an acknowledgement form, an establishment brochure, and videos. So we get to continue this conversation into February, and I hope that Rob and Atticus, that you would join us as well at that time, just as a part of the group. So if no one has any other questions or comments, please know that you can always reach out to me or go through our website and get information. And I will be sending out an email letting everybody know that this presentation has been posted to our website. And you're welcome to forward these meetings to anybody that you think would enjoy joining them. So you don't have to ask, you can just forward the meeting invites to anyone. And then if you want to be added to our distribution list and you're not, please let me know or go to our website and fill out that form. And with that, I would like to say to everyone that I hope you all have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. And we have so much to be thankful for, in the past 2 years that we've lived through this pandemic. So happy Thanksgiving, and I hope that everyone has a fantastic holiday season. And we will see you on February 10th, 2022 at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. So thank you, Rob and Atticus, and everyone for your questions and your comments and your open minds.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rob and Atticus, I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you all.
It's always fun.
Thank you all. It's nice to see your faces too.
Isn't it fun? Yeah, if anybody before we leave wants to come off of turned off. Hi, Jody. Jody, I'm coming to visit you.
Yes, come on, come on.
We'll do it.
Thank you. Take
All
care.
right.
Hello. Good to see you there, DS Training Unit, DCS. Right. Well, everybody have a great rest of your day. I'm going to stop recording.